Hello everybody, welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Valspar Championship Initial Research Show. Another week in the books and another pretty dismal performance from yours truly. So hopefully you had a lot more success than I did this past week for the Players Championship. Didn't get a whole lot right, I don't feel. And even the 6 of 6 lineup that I did get through, I believe every single player forgot to adjust their clocks forward today, and they just decided to not they didn't play golf. I don't know what they did, but it wasn't play golf. But like I said, hopefully you had a lot more success than I did for this past week at the Players Championship. Scotty Scheffler is on quite a heater in the past 14 or so months with 6 wins in those 14 months. Big purse for him. So if you had Scotty Scheffler, congratulations. I was nowhere near him. Was a little scared off by the prior course form. And he goes out and makes it look pretty easy in some pretty difficult conditions. So let me know if you were a winner. If you were, reach out to me in chat or in the comments or on social media. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community. But we are moving to the final event for the Florida Swing. That's right, it's the Valspar and Innisbrook. And not only that, it is also March Madness. So we have a lot to talk about this evening. We are focused obviously on the Valspar, but if you have March Madness ideas or questions, feel free to jump in chat. I would love a little banter, as since it is March Madness week, I will absolutely be showing my fandom. But we are here for the Valspar, so let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, a much better DFS player. If you are become a member at Fantasy National, you don't have to listen to a loser like me. You can go and make your own analysis, make your own mixed condition models, see the data for yourself, and then come up with winning lineups. So Fantasy National is the best tool out there. The project that they've been working on is, I think, completed. It is a fantastic tool. Coincides with DraftKings, so if you play over at DraftKings as well, it is a must-have in your arsenal. So go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is where I post my betting cards week after week, and you would notice that I was a pretty quick loser this week. Had Fitzpatrick who missed the cut, Zalatoris who made the cut and then decided to just walk around Sawgrass for 2 days. The big 600 to 1 shot that I absolutely put a win wager on actually ended up being the highest performing player in any of my wagers, which is saying something considering I put a top 20 on him and he didn't come through in that either. So it was just an all-around bad week. But if you want to see the betting cards that I do week after week for the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at Twitter. Twitter and Instagram are where I post a summary of the research that I do throughout the week pertaining to previous winners, maybe some course facts and whatnot. And with baseball season quickly rolling around, I will be putting some baseball research out as well. So make sure you give me a follow at those 2 places if you want to see a summary of the research that I do. But the main research, or the in-depth research that I do, is over at Twitch, and that link is also in the description. I will be live tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So if you are interested in seeing the in-depth research or going and looking back at last week's mixed condition model, see how my thought process, my critique works week in and week out, how I assess my performance, if you are interested in any of that. If you just want to be a part of a more laid-back, music in the background, relaxed atmosphere, looking at some golf data and golf trends, then join me 10:30 tomorrow and give me a follow over at Twitch. Twitch is also where I do some gaming. It's where I do a lot of the baseball content. So if you're interested in all that, think about giving me a follow over there. And then finally, we're live Chat's open. Again, how was your Players Championship? Did you have Scotty Scheffler? Did you have any good lineups? Are you a college basketball fan? What do you think of March Madness this year? Is your team in it? Do you like your team's draw? All of that stuff. And then, obviously, what we're mainly here for, the Valspar. Do you have any early leans? Who do you think is the best player to have the chance to dethrone our two-time champion at the Valspar? So we're going to get into all that. Let's do our initial research for the 2023 Valspar Championship. And of course, it wouldn't be complete if I wasn't going to show off my fandom, because it's March Madness week. So here we go. We're going to move over to the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. And we are in Palm Harbor, Florida, for the Valspar Championship at Innisbrook Resort, the Copperhead course, the famous 3-hole stretch of the Snake Pit. It is a very difficult course. It is listed as a par 71 at 7,340 yards, so a pretty long par 71. However, it is not a long course in a vacuum, so we're not going to be looking at any long or short course metrics. You see the Stimp 12. We'll see that these greens have traditionally played fast to even lightning. But as I mentioned last week, for the players, Valspar is one of the tournaments that has the same conditions on the greens that Sawgrass has. It is normally Bermuda, but at this time of the year, Bermuda is dormant, so the greens are actually overseeded with Poa Trivialis. So we can take a look at this past week's Players Championship, see who putt well, maybe give us an early idea on some players to look at in that regard. There's 3 other courses that use Poa Trivialis for overseed. That'd be the Waste Management, the Valero Texas Open, and the American Express. So those courses are the four that make up the Poa Trivialis overseed on the PGA Tour. And we'll also look and see if putting form or historical putting success matters as well. Some specific metrics or information about Innisbrook. Specifically, average green size, about 5,800 square feet, so right at tour average. Not a lot of fairway. These fairways are pretty narrow. Not a lot of rough either, but what rough there is very difficult to play out of. There are 9 holes with water in play. I mentioned the Poa Trivialis overseed, ryegrass overseed throughout the rest of the course, the fairways, the rough, and whatnot. But as we noted last week, and on the GCSAA tournament fact sheet for the players, and it turned out to be very true, as the players, the rough at Sawgrass this week was very difficult to play out of, thick, all that. You see here additional notes. Rough height increased to almost 4 inches, 3 3/4, from 3 inches in the previous years. So this rough is longer this year, so it's going to be more difficult to play out of. The intermediate cut around the greens has been decreased to not even 2 feet to bring the rough closer to the greens. So if you are not hitting the green, you are going to be in the rough more than likely. So we're going to be looking at some around the green metrics. Absolutely. The fairways are overseeded. Average landing fairway width is 22 paces. Not very wide at all. And the architect is Larry Packard. So no course architect or filter to be looking at this week, unlike last week when we had Pete Dye. So there's a look at Innisbrook from a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. Let's move on over to Fantasy National as soon as it decides that it wants to load. And our field for this week is fairly solid, especially considering that the players is the week before. You have Maverick McNeely, Taylor Montgomery, Keegan Bradley, Justin Rose is in the field this week. Justin Thomas is in the field this week. Matthew Fitzpatrick. Your two-time defending champion is Sam Burns. He has won this event 2 years in a row. Has played very, very well at Innisbrook in his career. And you see, I've got this set for the PGA Tour season. So these are your top performers since the start of the PGA Tour season, dating back to the Fortinet. I don't have any other filters in there as of now. I don't have Windfinder up, anything to that effect. We'll look at Windfinder tomorrow, and then obviously Wednesday night during the DFS Tactics show. But let's go ahead and go to the course breakdown in Fantasy National and take a look at Innisbrook from a scorecard and graphical view. First thing I like to do is look for the 9th and 10th most difficult holes, try to figure out where par is. If par falls in between or right around the 9th or 10th most difficult hole, that's generally going to indicate that it is an average difficulty course or tournament. Where you see the 10th and the 11th are still almost a 10th over par. 13th is still over par. The 14th most difficult hole, or otherwise the 5th easiest hole, is where par falls at just under it. So you have the 4 par 5s. Now this year it is saying that it's going to be 3 par 5s. So again, I will try to find that information for you. But historically, the 4 par 5s have been the easiest. The 2 par 5s on the back have played to a quarter of a shot under par. The par 5 5th has played to 5/100ths under par. That is not a whole lot. And then the easiest hole has played to about 3,500ths. But you see, there's not a lot of eagles. It is just a birdie hole. There's not a lot of eagles to be had around Innisbrook. Overall, you can see the difficulty here. Even though you do have a good birdie opportunity on the par 5 first, you've got some very difficult holes here. You've got 3/10ths over par here. You've got 2/10ths, 2/10ths, 1,500ths, 1,500ths. A lot of bogeys around Innisbrook. A lot of bogeys. Pars are generally good scores except for on the par 5s. And the course, its length comes in the par 3s, where you have 195 is the shortest par 3. You have a 235-yard par 3. And then on the back, you have 200 and 215. So very long par 3s here at Innisbrook. You also have a 600-yard par 5 that adds to the length as well. But the length of the course definitely comes into the par 3s. Not a lot of eagle opportunities, as I mentioned. Couple of decent birdie chances, but we'll see how much scoring factors here. Overall, it has been a pretty difficult tournament. Moving to average strokes gained per round, or strokes gained by shot type per round, you can see putting far outweighing approach. Around the green is outweighing off the tee, meaning this has been a short game contest or tournament for players that have finished in the top 10, and it's only going to get exaggerated. Short game still higher than ball striking there. Putting still the highest in terms of strokes gained. And then for the winners, you can see the big spike in putting, which is to be expected, but around the green almost pushes over the half a shot per round. Approach does make a considerable rise to the 1.1 area, but even so, the around the green or the short game is a considerably higher metric here. That is due to the around the green, as we'll see, especially in Microsoft Excel. So we're looking at a short game course. Approach is still going to be important, absolutely, but this is more of a short game course, even though it is a long course. So that tells you that pars are generally good scores, as I mentioned. Bogey avoidance is probably going to be a big deal. We're going to be looking at around the green, probably some scrambling, all of that type of stuff. I'll bring it back to the top 10s. We look at average strokes gained by hole by par. The par 5s are pacing, as you would expect. Par 5s at almost 2/10ths, about 1.175. And the 4s and 3s are pretty darn equal. Par 4s are slightly outweighing the par 3s. we go to the top fives. Now, this is a little bit misleading. The par fours do kind of edge out and start to take a little bit of a distance in terms of importance away from par threes. But you see the par fives are still pretty clearly the most important holes here at Innisbrook. But I think this is a little bit misleading because when you go to the winners, the par threes actually outpace the par fours. Would make a lot of sense, especially since these par threes are pretty darn difficult. They're long, challenging. I think par threes are going to be a pretty big deal. We'll confirm that over in Microsoft Excel. But the par fives, those are your scoring opportunities here. You've just got to get birdies on par fives because there's not a lot of places elsewhere here at Innisbrook to get them. And again, looking at the scorecard, now the short par three, is actually one of the easier holes, but you see it still plays over par at 400ths. Then you have a 10th over par, 800ths over par, and 1500ths over par. So all of the par threes do play on average over par. So if you are making par, you are generally gaining ground on the field. So that is why the par threes, I believe, will have a decent amount of significance this week. We scroll down, look at hole composition. You look at the par threes, and you got the 1 from 175 to 200, measuring 195. 3 from 200 to 225. 1 225 plus. Your par fours, you've got a short, not drivable, but short par 4, 350 to 4. 5 from 400 to 450. And then 3 from 450 to 5. Then your 4 par 5s, 550 to 6, 3 of them, and then 1 long, 600 plus, par 5. Approach shot distribution. The majority of approach shots, especially compared to the average tour event, looks like it's from 175 to 200. But you have your fair share of 175 to 200, 200 plus in general, even 150 to 175. So we're going to be looking at these longer approach shots. But we'll see if 175 to 200 is indeed the most important, especially when you consider in relation to the average tour event. The average, or the historic cut line, I should say, last year was -2, and you see that is the easiest it has ever been, dating back to 2004. Generally, you are at +2, +1, anywhere in this +2 to 4 range, maybe sliding down to a +1, but generally a very difficult course. And then last year played really easy. 2021 played to even par, so it has gotten easier the past 2 to 3 years. So we'll see if that is a trend or if that's just a little bit of a blip in the historical timeline, if you will. My guess is it's the blip, but it is 4 straight years that the cut line has been decreasing. So it went from +4 to +2 to even, and then -2 last year. So we'll see. I still think the course is going to be difficult, but we'll take a big look at that throughout the week. Scoring distribution. More bogeys than birdies. Not even 16% in terms of birdies, but you have almost 17% in terms of bogeys, and you have a bar that is visible here on the doubles. So you stack those on top of each other, you've got more scores that are over par than under par. That's why I'm thinking it is going to be difficult. Driving accuracy, 61% here versus 62% at the average tour event. Again, does that mean that these fairways are difficult to hit? Not necessarily. Players are just these fairways are narrow, but they're not necessarily difficult to hit because if we cheat and come down to the average driving distance, there is a lot of times where players are choosing the club down. 271 is the average driving distance here versus 283 at the average tour event. So 12 yards less here at Innisbrook. That is a massive difference. So while these fairways can be difficult to hit if you're using driver, a lot of players will choose to hit woods or irons off the tee, especially since the rough has been grown out even more thick this year. Green regulation percentage. a lot less than the average tour event. A little over 60% here versus 66% at the average tour event. So greens, very difficult to hit. Again, adding to the difficulty of the course. Now, scrambling, players are more successful scrambling here than the average tour event, meaning scrambling won't be as difficult. However, I will revert to have you think back to the GCSA tournament fact sheet at the start of the show, where they really shortened the intermediate cut to bring the rough a lot closer to the greens. So my guess is that scrambling is going to be a lot less successful this year. So I think we're going to be wanting to look at scrambling this week in pretty high demand. 3 putts about the same as the average tour event, a little bit less, but roughly the same. And then proximity, even though this is a difficult tournament, these greens are average size, you are slightly closer in proximity when you hit the green in regulation by about a half a foot. So there's a look at the Innisbrook or Copperhead course from a GCS or from a Fantasy National scorecard and graphical view. Let's come back to this year's field. Let's just take a look at some difficult metrics. We saw that greens were difficult to hit. The fairways can be difficult to hit, even with players clubbing down. I'm going to have to expand this timeline to include the entirety of 2022. But since the start of 2022, your top performers in rounds that are difficult have been Matt Fitzpatrick, Keegan Bradley, Justin Thomas, Sam Burns, Adam Hadwin, Ben Taylor, Wyndham Clark, Adam Schenk, Eric Barnes, and Tommy Fleetwood. So there's a look at your top 10 players when it's been difficult. Before we go too much further, let's take a look at some historic conditions. And again, last year was the lowest that the cut line had ever been. However, the first 2 rounds only played to average, and then your easy round was in round 3 after the cut. But still, the cut was -2. It has been listed as Bermuda, but as we saw with at Sawgrass last week and all that, it is Poa Trivialis overseeded. So we'll look at some putting metrics in that regard throughout the week. But it has been classified as Bermuda. But I want you to pay attention to this scoring relative to par. You've had average and then average the past 2 years. In 2021, the cut line was even. In last year, it was -2. Every year before that, it had been over par. So, and you see just the sheer amount of rounds of difficult that Innisbrook has been. Now, are they intentionally making the course more easy? I don't know. I would tend not to think so, because everything that we saw in the GCSA tournament fact sheet makes me think that they're wanting to toughen it up, meaning bringing the rough closer to the greens, increasing the length of the rough, all of that. I think that it's going to play more difficult than it has perhaps the past couple of years. You see the green speeds, they've always been fast. They even touched lightning last year, but they have been sped up in recent years. They did have a couple of years of average, but generally speaking, it's been fast and even touched lightning. And if the rough was listed as long last year at 3 inches, you can imagine what it's going to be like with 3.75 or 3 3/4 inch rough this year. So that is the reason why I think it's going to go back to difficult, or some of the reason why I think it's going to go back to difficult. So we're going to be looking at difficult relative to par. We're going to be looking at long rough, and we're going to be looking at fast greens, preferably on Poa Trivialis. But we'll take a look at a lot of the comparison course for putting. Again, that's the American Express, Waste Management, Sawgrass, and the Valero. So let's move back to the strokes gained page view. We saw that it was listed as long rough, and it's been lengthened this year. So let's take a look at some long rough metrics, especially some around the green in long rough. So your top players in strokes gained around the green in long rough since the start of 2022 have been Samuel No, Jimmy Walker, Kevin Kisner, Tommy Fleetwood, Ben Griffin, JT Poston, Kevin Streelman, Bill Hawes, Adam Hadwin, and Matt Fitzpatrick. So Fitzpatrick was up there in terms of total for difficult, now is up there and around the green. Same with Tommy Fleetwood. But I don't think any of these other 8, I think maybe Adam Hadwin was top 10 for difficult as well. But really it's been just those 2 that have popped on both. Let's see, nothing with Architect, nothing with course length. Don't want to do anything in terms of specific putting because while we're technically on Bermuda, it is still Poa Trivialis. So we can take a look at some historical putting tomorrow, and I'll be doing that over on Twitch. So if you would like to see that, join me tomorrow over on Twitch as we look at some historical putting. But I think this is a good time to move on over to the Tournament History tab or the Strokes Gained Total tab and get a feel for who has played this tournament well the past 5 editions here. And I can't say 5 years because, again, the Sawgrass, the Players, was the first tournament that was canceled by the PGA Tour in 2020. And so moving forward, we're going to have a lot of these tournaments be missing the 2020 edition. So the last 5 editions will stretch back to 2017. But in that time frame, your number 1 strokes gained total player clearly has been Sam Burns, your two-time defending champion. He also has a T30 and a T12. He has just really lit this place up. Adam Hadwin, you see, won back in 2017, so he is a former champion here. Your 2018 and 2019 champion, not here. It is the same person, Paul Casey, who has moved on to live. So you've got a 2-time defending champion preceding or following another 2-time defending champion. But some other players that have played pretty well here: Justin Thomas, 2 for 3. Matthew Neesmith, only in 2 tournaments, has the 4th most in terms of strokes gained total of the players in the field this week. So he is leading in terms of strokes gained total per tournament or per event here. He's got a T3 and a T21. Stuart Sink has played very well here, 3 for 4. Keegan, 3 for 5. Russell Knox, 4 for 5. Davis Riley was solo second last year, but only in 1 event, or 1 try here. Luke Donald is also a former champion at Innisbrook way back in 2012, but he has had success here. A middling to clunker, a clunker, but a top 10 and a top 20, so 4 for 5. Denny McCarthy, 3 for 3, probably no surprise with putting being very important. And he also made a pretty good run at Sawgrass. Bill Hawes has had some success lately here, 4 for 4. Lucas Glover, 4 for 4. But you quickly get into single digits in terms of strokes gained total across 5 years, and there's a lot of miscuts in here. So there's a look at some of the players that have played Innisbrook the best. The other end of the spectrum, players that haven't played it the best. My 600 to 1 shot from this past week, Chesson Hadley, not good here. Peter Malnati, not good here, 1 for 5. Richie Wierenski, 1 for 5. Martin Laird, 0 for 4. Nick Taylor's 3 for 5, but very, very poor in strokes gained total. See, Charlie Hoffman has 2 top 20s, and then the others are missed cuts. So a little bit of all or nothing, although the all is not wins. Let's see. You've got Trey Mullinex. Makes a lot of sense. Trey Mullinex generally doesn't play difficult courses well. He's more a birdie getter on easy courses, but he's 2 for 4. He's been pretty bad. Michael Kim, Kevin Tway, Kelly Craft, Sam Ryder. So there's a look at some of the players that have not fared well here at Innisbrook over the past 5 editions. I think that's probably a good segue to go to Microsoft Excel, so let's go ahead and do that. And let's take a look at Innisbrook from a raw data perspective. Now this is the comparison course tab, if you will, comparing Innisbrook to every other full field course on the PGA Tour. You see approach about even, about 2%. It's saying 2% less important, but pretty darn close to full field course average. But look at the around the green, 21% more important. Again, just we're going to be looking at a whole lot of around the green. Distance not mattering. Again, this is a club down course, or players are choosing to take less than driver to make sure they find the fairway. Good drives gained, 15% more important. Big number there. So again, the ability to hit fairways or to hit the green if you miss the fairway going to be a big deal, seemingly. Scoring, as I would have thought, bogeys more important than the birdies, but we'll confirm that tomorrow in the Data Dive show with the prior leaderboards. But at least in terms of raw numbers, it's looking like the bogeys are more important to avoid than gaining the birdies. And again, par 3s, 20% more important. If there's a range, it is saying it's the 175 to 200. However, there are 3 par 3s that measure 200 to 225. So I'm not sure if this is a skewed data point or whatnot, but definitely par 3s total are going to be a big factor. There are 5 of them on the course after all. Par 4s, pretty mitigated. 28% less important. Makes a lot of sense because there are 5 par 3s and 4 par 5s. Now, the 400-450 range might be something, as 5 of your 9 par 4s fall to this range. So perhaps. But that's about it maybe in the par 4s. In the par 5s, we saw absolutely very important. It's the highest strokes gained par hole by a long shot. 23.5% more important. 550-600 would make a lot of sense too, as 3 of the 4 par 4s fall to here. Then lastly, in terms of a comparison against other courses, we saw that the majority of approach shots came from 175 to 200. It's a little bit more important, but really it's just all of the longer approaches. The 200 plus is getting cut off. That's at 14.5% positive. But let's take a look at some of the actual raw numbers. You see approach, even though putting showed that it was higher in terms of strokes gained on the graph, at least for the players that have finished in the top 30, sorry, let me move my mouse there for you. For the players that have finished in the top 30, approach has been slightly higher than putting. You do have low and high outliers for each of them. So, take what you will with that. The around the green has seemingly been getting less important, but with the rough being moved closer to the greens, I think it's going to be a bigger factor this year. Distance has been kind of all or nothing. Good drives was much more important than the average full field course, and that's a very, very low outlier. My goodness, this is going to be a massive number now. 30% more important in good drives gained, so we'll definitely be looking at that metric across the week. We move into the scoring. We saw that bogeys were more important than the birdies, and again, in raw numbers, the bogeys are more important, and percentage-wise, they're more important. And that's a very low outlier. So again, it looks like the bogey avoidance is going to be the way to go this week. Par 3s, big number here and very consistent. That's what I like to see as a statistician. You want to see consistent data. And this has been very, very consistent year over year, the importance of these par 3s. The 175 to 200 has been very, very consistent. So perhaps we do need to look at 175 to 200 because one of the par 3s does measure to 200 exactly on the scorecard. So you could see that easily moving into the 175 to 200. Okay, but none of these specific lengths are making up half of the par 3s. So I'll be interested to see, especially tomorrow over on Twitch, and I'll do a lot of investigation into it there, what the 175 to 200 looks like for the players that have been in the top 10, the winners, what they've been doing on the 175 to 200. But the par 3 is absolutely something to focus on. Par 4s have been mitigated in importance except for the 400 to 450. That's actually a pretty high outlier. But you see that roughly 2/3 of your strokes gained total in par 4s are coming from this length. So pretty good indication that if we want to look at par 4 data, we should be looking just at the 400 to 450. Par 5s, pretty consistent. You do have a little bit of a high outlier here, but fairly consistent, I would argue. And again, this is about 70 to 75% of your strokes gained in par 5, so maybe we want to look at just 550 to 600. It's possible. It's possible. Again, we'll be doing a lot of that research over on Twitch tomorrow, and I will do it in the Data Dive show in prior leaderboards. Lastly, proximity. We saw that these three ranges were still the most important. A fairly high outlier here, so I imagine this would take it to negative in terms of importance against full field courses. And that is a very low outlier. So again, these 200 plus, which would make sense because of your par 5s. Okay. Something else tomorrow that we'll do over on Twitch, I definitely want to take a look at the players' data, see how that worked, see if I was right into just focusing on the 200 plus proximity, if the par 5s were the big deal. So I'll be doing all of that over on Twitch as well tomorrow. But proximity wise, it looked like it was the 200 plus for Innisbrook. So we're going to round out the show on a Sunday evening like we normally do, bringing up the early look file. Let's take a look at the players in the past 4 years. I don't go back more than 5 years, and because 2020 was canceled, I'm not incorporating the 2017 like Fantasy National did. Let me bring up that again. So I'm not incorporating the 2017 that Fantasy National is. I am just going by the past 5 years date-wise. So the most events that anybody will have are 4 because of the cancellation. But I do want to take a look and see year over year who has consistently played this tournament and played it well. You can see Davis Riley is technically the highest average finish. He's played it once. He was a solo runner-up last year. But I'm going to remove the players that have only played it once. I want to get an idea for the players who have at least played it somewhat consistently and what they've been doing well. So you see Justin Thomas there. Sam Burns, all in putting. All in putting. And again, these are Bermuda, so it makes some sense. But, I mentioned him last week, Wednesday night on the DFS Tactics show for the players. This is technically Bermuda. He's also been very good at all of the other Poa Trivialis overseed tournaments in putting. I believe he's the #1 strokes gained putter on that surface. So there you go. A lot of it's coming from here, but he's putt well at Sawgrass. He's putt well at the Waste Management, etc., etc. Neesmith. Doing Matthew Neesmith things, but he too is also making putts here, which is not his forte. So anytime, kind of like Hideki, anytime Matthew Neesmith is looking good in terms of putting form, got to pay attention. Russell Knox has just been very consistent at this tournament, very good. Joel Damon 2 for 2. Luke Donald, again, a former champion way back when, but he was never really an off-the-tee type player anyway. It's been his short game, and he's been doing it with the irons as well lately here at Innisbrook. Bill Haas we looked at a little bit. He's been doing it all in the short game. Rory Sabatini's 2 for 3. Been doing it in the short game. Again, this is a short game course, so Zach Johnson makes a lot of sense. You would think Kevin Kisner would be a lot better. Now, he's putting well, but his around the green hasn't been good here. But he's played it okay. Average of a top 42. Doesn't sound great, but again, just that's an average for his past 3 years. He has missed the cut once. So let's take a look at these players that have averaged about a top 45. This is 17 players. That's good enough just to get a rough idea. So off the tee here, 0.6. It's not very high at all. The approach, 1.6. That's a pretty big factor. Around the greens, a 0.8. It's a little lower than I thought it was going to be honest. And then putting's a 1.2. So it's following that graph pretty well, except for the irons, because Justin Thomas and Matthew Neesmith, and to a little bit lesser of an extent, Stuart Sink, have been very good with their irons here. Whereas it's really only been Sam Burns that's dominated on the greens. But Sam Burns is your 2-time defending champion, so probably want to put a little bit of extra weight into putting as well. We saw good drives gained was the big factor here at Innisbrook in Excel. So if we look at the players that have averaged a top 45, yeah, that's a big number, 2.5. It looks like only one player is negative. So if any of all the players that have averaged a top 45 finish the past 4 years here at Innisbrook, only one's been negative in good drives gained. So that gives you a really good idea of what's going to matter. Greens, you see Matthew Neesmith's been very, very good at that as well. But this number I don't think is as high as... Yeah, it's only a 2.5. I guess that's the same number. For whatever reason, I thought this was a 2.8, but this is a 2.5 as well. I think it's going to be good drives gained because it's taking into account the fairways and the greens. So I do like looking at good drives gained this week. It's where I'll be putting my focus. And again, only one player negative in that statistic. Scoring, let's see. Sam Burns has been getting the birdies, but almost everybody else has been even or bogey focused or avoiding the bogeys. See, Justin Thomas. Neesmith's been even. Knox and McCarthy are bogey avoidance. Now, Joel Damon is birdies, but again, all of these other players here are even or focused more on avoiding bogeys. I think it's going to be the bogey avoidance, but Sam Burns is gaining the birdies at a very decent rate here. I'd imagine a lot of that with the putter anyway. Par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Quite a few negatives here in the par 3s for the players that have played this pretty well. Surprising to see. This is a 0.7. The par 4s, a 2.1. The par 5s, 1.3. So it's saying the par 3s are the players that have played it the best are the least at par 3s. I mean, that's what the data is showing, but that's quite surprising with 5 par 3s on this course. Lucas Glover has not been very good at them. Neesmith's been very good at them. Okay, so here's one way to kind of look at it. You have Sam Burns, so 1.6 in par 3s, but he's only a 2.6 in terms of par 4s. And the thing is, like the par 4s, I will move my big head out of the way for you all. Yes, it's a higher number, but they're not all that higher than some of the par 3 numbers. It's just all of these players have been consistently good at them. You know, you have a bunch of 2.2s and 1.7s and 8s and whatnot. Whereas you do have a few players that have been negative in these par 3s. These same players. But overall, like the highest number here in any of these two columns is a 4.3, but 3.9. Okay, that's why the par 3s are falling quickly, because it's at 3.9 and it drastically falls to a 2.2 for the players that have averaged a top 45. Whereas you have a 4.3, a 3.5, 3.3. So par 4s have been, they are mitigated in terms of importance against other full field courses. You're still going to have to play them well. So I don't know if we should completely ignore par 4s. They certainly aren't going to have the level of importance that they can have or have had in some of my models recently. Because there are 5 par 3s, I am still leaning par 3s. And of course, par 5s. Like, look at these par 5 numbers over here. Justin Thomas, your 2-time champion. Sam Burns is demolishing the par 5s. Matthew Neesmith has been demolishing the par 5s. In fact, you have only 2 players that are negative in par 5s at Innisbrook. Okay. Hey, good evening, Joanne. Thanks for jumping in chat. It's good to see you. Hopefully your players was a lot better than mine, and that you are ready for some March Madness. If you are a college basketball fan, if you are, your team is in it. Good luck. You can see I am repping my fandom for this week. But thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Let's see, par 5s. I think, and I mean, you look here, look at the pretty heavy green in that 550 to 6, where Excel was showing us this is the most important length. You got a 0.9, you've got a 0.3, and a 0.1. So literally triple the importance of the next highest. So perhaps it is just the 550 to 6 that we'll be looking at in terms of par 5s. Lastly, let's take a look at proximity. Again, Excel was showing us that it was these 3 lengths that mattered the most. Anything jump off here to me? Not particularly. You got a couple of higher negatives here. You do have some heavy green, though. Sam Burns has been doing it, again, in the 200 plus, but that would probably coincide with his big par 5 number, as in, attacking the par 5s in 2. Let's see. Matthew Neesmith's been just very good at the long irons. Justin Thomas has been just good, period, at procs here. Let's see. That's a 13. What is this? This seems like it'll be a low number. Yeah, that's negative. And that's supposedly the length of approach shot that is most common here. 175 to 200. So again, I'll be really, really focused on this tomorrow over on Twitch, and then tomorrow night in the Data Dive show, really trying to hammer down if any of the proximities are the biggest keys, and if there is one, which one. It might be total procs, but I've been burned on total procs lately, so a little bit gun shy with that. But for your research early on this week for the Valspar, definitely be focused on par 5s and 550 to 6s. And with 5 par 3s here at Innisbrook, take a long look at your top par 3 performers. I think that's going to be a pretty big deal this week with 5 par 3s. And then your bogey avoiders, this course I think will be more tough than it has been the past couple of years. Let's see. If we actually, tell you what, we included the players that have only played it twice. That's a sort. I don't want to do that. Let's take a look at the players who have played this at least 3 of the 4 times available. Now we're getting a little bit of a clearer picture, it looks like. You can see off the tee, just not a factor. I'll even go down to the top 50. Like that, these players are negative. For the players that have consistently played here year over year, the approach for players in the top 50, 0.8. Okay, here we go. Around the green is now a 1.2, so that's actually outweighing the approach. And the putting is a 1.8. All right, so now it's starting to really line up for the players that have consistently played this course year over year. The players that have played it 3 and 4 times. Distance, you can see here, not a factor at all. Good drives gained, again, even stretching down to the top 50, only one player is negative in good drives gained. So that's definitely what we'll be focused on there. 1.1 versus 1.5. So, yes, Sam Burns, your 2-time defending champion, is more on the birdies, but then it's a heavy skew toward bogey avoidance. Yep, that's what I'm seeing there. And your par 5s, I know I've skipped 3s and 4s, but your par 5s, as you can see here, you've got 1, 2, 3 players that are negative, but pretty close to field average. Your 2-time champions demolishing the par 5s. Keegan Bradley, even though he's only 2 for 4 here, he is still one of the top average finishers here. He's very good at the par 5s here. You've got Bill Haas, who's 3 for 3. Stuart Sink has been very good here. Knox, they're doing it with the par 5s. They're absolutely doing it with the par 5s. All right, so I feel a lot better now having factored in only the players that have been playing here 3 and 4 times instead of keeping the players that have played it twice. Okay. But that's going to do it for the initial research show this evening. Thanks for joining me. Joanne, it was good to see you in chat. Hopefully you're able to make chat more often, show up and talk a little bit of golf. Hopefully all things are well and you are ready for the Valspar and ready for March Madness. Thanks for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone out there who watch, tune in, listen, supports the channel by commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. It has been, I followed up a pretty good January and early February with a pretty dismal back half February and early March. So a little bit on the losing side here. We're going to see if we can't turn that around as we get closer and closer to the Masters. Reminder on the schedule, tomorrow 10:30 a.m. Eastern, I'll be over on Twitch doing a whole lot of the in-depth research, and then be looking for the summary of that research on social media, Twitter and Instagram. I'll post that there tomorrow around, either a pattern that the winners have or something interesting about the course, something along those lines. Next week, there are 2 tournaments again. Next week is the match play. The last time, at least for the foreseeable future, that match play is going to be on the PGA schedule. It has not been renewed for 2024. So this will be the last match play seemingly for a while. So it'll be a fun week next week with match play and the Corrales. So it'll be a 2 tournament week again next week. But that is in the future. We are focused on the Valspar and getting back on the right track. So for all of the wagers that you made this past week for the Players' Championship, for all the DFS contests you entered this past week for the Players' Championship, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive Show, may all your bets be profitable.